Good afternoon. Haiti Oropesa with Florida You Judge. And today I have my friend and host for this afternoon's broadcast, Stephanie Poynor. She's become incredibly popular in the last year. And so I'm glad she's hosting this afternoon and giving me a little bit of a break. And we have as a guest, Tampa's Councilman, Bill Carlson. He's
Hi,
also
everybody.
become He's also become incredibly popular. So I'm gonna be quiet, and Stephanie, you take it away.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Bill, thanks for anyway. I just want to say thank you for coming on this afternoon. And I know that we have changed the time a little bit on Haiti by moving it back this afternoon. But I also want to point out that the reason why is because Bill is an awesome single dad. So he does a lot with his boys, and we want to make sure to accommodate that.
Wait, this is for Bill because that is true. I'm gonna go ahead and use one of my sound effects. I want to just try it out. Yay for good single fathers. Good for we admire you.
Thank you. My youngest son had chef classes this morning, so we wanted to make sure that he got to take that.
Wow,
that's awesome. He'd be cooking for you, so you won't have to worry about eating out as getting feedback.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not getting feedback. You are. That's fine. If anybody out there in the live broadcast world and you're following this, please let us know if there's anything glitchy via the audio or whatnot.
Let's get down to some basic Bill. Basic Bill, why are you on city council?
I was a community activist for years, neighborhood activist for years, and I was unhappy with the way things were going. And I helped start several organizations. One of them is Cafe on Tampa, which is a group originally of neighborhood leaders, but also community leaders. It's what I call an open source civic club. So there's no membership, there's no selection committee, no membership fee, and anybody can show up any week. And if you can't afford the $12 breakfast, we let you in free, no questions asked. So as I was talking to neighborhood leaders and community leaders, they were fed up with the way things were running. And so 4 years ago, they said, okay, now it's your turn. You have to run. And it was never an ask for me to run city council, but I ran to try to bring good government back to Tampa.
Bill, I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important challenge that the city of Tampa has currently?
I think we're still challenged to do good planning. Number one, we need to plan around people instead of buildings. The city in the past has been pretty much designed around helping developers build what they want. And what we need to do is design the city around people and then ask builders to build what the people need. And that's been a slow transition in the last few years, but everybody seems to be working in that direction. By the way, when I talk to developers, they would rather design the city around people as well. It would save the city a lot of time if we design the community around what the people want. Instead of having fights between neighborhoods and developers, we can just go ahead and plan the way the community wants it, and then the developers can build within that plan.
Okay, hold on. We have somebody that I know that you like a lot, Stephanie, Keela McCaskill, and she wanted to say thank you for Cafe con Tampa. Hey, Keela, thanks for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. Bill, let me ask you, how would you start with planning around people versus what would be your idea of the first step to do that?
Number one, the city is going through a planning process right now. And what we need to do is go neighborhood by neighborhood instead of looking at a citywide plan. The consultants that initially were helping with the city asked me, what do you think we need to do to modernize the plan? And I said, well, is there a standard plan format that other cities use? And they said, no. I said, well, what do you mean modernize then? Just make it easy for people to build whatever they want, wherever they want. And instead, what I think we need to do is go neighborhood by neighborhood, let neighbors define what they want in their area. And we're going to ask them to put some density somewhere in most neighborhoods, probably along the fringes, along the corridors. but we also need to build what planners call neighborhood commercial districts. These are small areas with a little bit more density. We have a few more housing units, but we also have small commerce like small grocery store, small pharmacy, coffee shop, those kinds of things. One of the problems in areas, especially like East Tampa, is that people have to drive across town to buy eggs or milk. If they could walk there, we would take trips off the roads, but we also would create hubs for community activity and community networking and business. We need to help promote entrepreneurs in those areas.
And how do you think economic development kind of meshes with that plan for the different neighborhoods? How can we best forecast economic development in conjunction with building neighborhoods versus we need to concentrate strictly on businesses instead of making sure that the folks who are surrounding those businesses are also enjoying living in the city?
Yeah, the way that we're going to build multi-generational wealth is through helping people own their own businesses and helping them own their own houses. I encourage everyone to go to scorecard.com, tampascorecard.com, which is a website I put together with some of the best economists in the state, including at USF. And we looked at what are the top economic measures, the outcome measures that cities should use. What happens is that in the capital markets, when you buy a stock, you can look at the capital markets financials, and you know that they're presented in a consistent way. When cities promote themselves, they use arbitrary data. Some of it is what I call vanity data, and that's where a magazine will say you're number one in this or number two in that, but it's not based on data. The other thing is that you can use regional data or county data to throw off how a city looks. And what's happened is that to some extent, Tampa is hidden behind St. Pete and other cities in the area. Tampa Scorecard for the first time looks just at Tampa compared to the 6 largest cities in Florida and also to 3 aspirational cities. And what it shows is that we've fallen behind cities like St. Pete because they had more inclusive economic development. We need to focus on home ownership, for example, because our home ownership rates are really low. And we need to help promote more small business. I think Haiti or someone is bringing up the chart right now. But on that page, there's a link to the PowerPoint presentation, and there's also a link to the YouTube presentation that I gave to City Council. So if you have any thoughts on it, let me know. But what we need to do is organize economic development around real measures, outcome measures, not output measures. So the old style of economic development from the 1980s and before was that you focused on getting people to move from other cities and other states. And then the whole economy was based around growth. And part of the economy then was real estate based because you would build houses and offices for people to move in. What we're finding as the cities are getting more and more crowded, we find that that's not a great idea necessarily. We still need to welcome people to come. And, unlike countries, I lived in Singapore for a while, which is a city state, they can block their borders. So they can tell people from other surrounding cities they can't move there. If somebody wants to move from New York or Texas or wherever, we can't stop them from moving here. And if we don't accommodate them, then it's going to cause housing to go up in price for the people that are here. And so we need to continue to create new opportunities. We need to promote the real estate industry and also help companies that are moving here. But that shouldn't be the only goal. We should be focused on other things as well.
Something that I personally feel is that I see more and more often when things are asked for in the city of Tampa, everybody wants to study what other communities are doing before they make any moves forward. And in my opinion, that's not really showing leadership, that's showing being followers. How do you feel like Tampa is leading the way or Tampa is dragging behind in making some of the changes that we need to do in order to best serve the current citizens of our city, not necessarily the new people who are coming. And I don't want to put off newcomers, but I also want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the current population, because we can't count on somebody else is coming along to take care of us later.
Yeah, every city is unique. And as we look at other cities, no city is doing it perfectly. I was just in Boston with the Tampa Chamber, and they complained. The president of the city council complained that they have a terrible housing problem, they have a terrible transportation problem, and they have terrible inflation problems. And those happen to be the same things we're facing. They have the oldest underground subway system in America, and still they're having problems with it. And so whatever we get in terms of transportation or any kind of resource, we're always going to face challenges. But what I think we need to do is leapfrog other cities. Why should we copy just cities in the US when we can be the innovator in the US, or we can be the innovator in the world? An example, the legal department recently researched a request that I made to look at special parking considerations for restaurants that are mostly takeout or Uber, DoorDash oriented. So what happened in the past is that the requirement for parking spaces was designed around how many seats or tables you had in a restaurant, but there's no accommodation for the hundreds of cars that might show up at a restaurant to deliver food somewhere else. And so that's causing problems in our neighborhoods. And as the legal department looked around, they couldn't find any other cities that had a special law around that. And I said, well, at some point in the past, didn't we create, maybe in the 50s or 60s, didn't we create legislation around drive-throughs? At some point in the past, there were no drive-throughs at restaurants and places. And yes, we did create legislation around drive-throughs. And I said, why don't we be the innovator then? Why don't we create new legislation that other cities can copy about what we do in the case of restaurants that are mostly takeout?
I think that's an excellent example. So when I guess one of the questions that I have for my YIMBY friends, how do you feel about the missing middle, about the density and intensity in different parts of the city, and how we should look at the land use code to change that? And I know that's a pretty technical question, but it's something that we keep hearing about over and over again.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, what we need to do, there's a consultant that's being hired now. There's an RFP out anyway for a consultant to help with the land use code. And what I've said to the city staff is we need to go neighborhood by neighborhood and talk to people about what areas do you want to protect for single families? What areas do you want to allow limited commercial to go in? And what areas do you want to allow more density to go in? And typically, for example, if your neighborhood's along Dale Mabry, typically you'd want some kind of transition before you hit Dale Mabry. And so we've got to figure out where density should go. Instead of it going in the middle of Hyde Park, it can go somewhere on the fringes. Now, there is some level of density in just about every neighborhood, but we need to figure out where more of it could go. But there also are areas like Channel District, which it does not by right allow maximum density. Nobody's objecting to density in Channel District. And the Water Street project is now moving north. And so across the street from Meridian, they're going to go up to the FAA limit. That's the limit required because of planes. On the other side of Meridian, we're down one building that's 5 stories high. We should by right allow Channel District to go up to the same height as across the street. It just makes sense. And I also think Dale Mabry between Midtown and Kennedy, we should allow at least half a street or a street end that on both sides that they could go up to maximum density by right. We won't allow maximum density everywhere, but if we don't allow it somewhere, then the density is going to come into the middle of the neighborhoods.
Let's turn that sideways for just a second. And there was an article in the Tampa Bay Business Journal today that that basically, I'm going to use my own words, said that City Council turned down a budget that had infrastructure improvements and public safety improvements in it, and that by City Council voting against it, it kind of did away with those things. Would you like to elaborate on the realities of what happened with our budget?
Besides being a neighborhood leader, Stephanie is also on the City Council's Budget Advisory Committee, and she's happens to be one of the top experts on the budget in the city. So she's asking me a loaded question here.
Very, very afraid that I am an expert.
I mean, the thing is, if documents are available, and we read them, we find interesting things. Yeah, none of that was true. The City Council has been saying for 4 years that I've been on there that we need to focus on things like police and fire, affordable housing, parks, and roads. And a year ago, I voted against the entire city budget because the administration refused to increase the road repair budget. The road repair budget has been about $4.1 million for the last few years. even though during that same time, the overall budget more than doubled. And there's been excuse after excuse for not doing that. So what happened is then the administration came back at the last minute, blindsided us and said, we want to raise the taxes by 16%. And for that, we'll pay for those 5 things: police, fire, roads, parks, and affordable housing. But when you dug down into the budget, they didn't actually increase the budget for any of those things. What they actually were doing is increasing salaries. And so it was a bit of a shell game as we were presented it. And so the city council, with the public's backing, rejected the 16% increase, and I can explain why. But what we did is we actually increased, for the first time in years, we increased the road repair budget from 4.1 million to 11.1 million, and we put in record amounts for affordable housing and others. And so city council is moving fast to try to solve some of these problems. Longer term, we're going to need some other funding sources. But we're increasing the funding for the things people find important.
I'm going to be the first person to say that I am so excited for City Council to get a budget analyst, because the budget committee has been working on that budget for years, and it is a lot of work and a lot of time spent by 7 volunteers from the city. And so
I should say, to give credit where credit is due, the 11.1 million, the difference is 7 million. So we added 7 million. That 7 million came from something that Stephanie found in the budget. So we were able to move, instead of building a parking app and parking signs, which would be nice to have. Imagine if you go in a city parking lot, it would be like the ones at the airport where you know how many parking spaces are in there. It would be great to have that. But in the meantime, we need roads. Roads are falling apart all over the place. So city council almost tripled the budget for road repair.
I can't take total credit for that. My buddy Michael Bishop, who does a lot on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, he initially brought it up, and I went and found the statutes. And I think everybody was a little shocked that the statute said that we could use the money for paving, because normally parking is an enterprise fund, and we wouldn't be able to pull funding from that directly.
Well, we find, by the way, that brings up another point. What we find is that if city staff tell us that we can or can't do something, or a legal department tells us we can or can't do something, it's always good to get a second opinion, especially in the legal area, because usually the second opinion overturns the first opinion. And I can go into examples of that if you want, but we found a lot of things that we are able to do. The city, many people talk about the city being a strong mayor form of government. It's a misnomer, because in the charter, there's no reference at all to the term strong mayor. All that it means is that the mayor is elected directly by the public. If you look at our charter compared to some other cities where the mayor is directly elected, there's a pretty good balance of power. Examples: the mayor can go out and negotiate contracts and can hold RFPs, but city council approves the contracts and approves the budgets. And so there is a balance of power as defined in the charter, and it's a pretty equal balance of power. The reason why a mayor would be a strong mayor is if they either have a solid 4 votes, where they always get 4 votes no matter what happens, or if the legal department gives them an opinion that favors their point of view.
Let's hit on the other big fish in the budget. The police, we talked about them, didn't we? No, we talked about paving first. But how about police and fire? And you have been very vocal about the fact that you did not want them lumped together, that you would like for them to be separated into police and fire and not be lumped together as public safety.
Yeah, I think the important thing to do is listen to the hardworking men and women of the police department and the fire department. We also need to listen to the experts and staff and the administrators. But it's really important to listen to the hardworking men and women. And what the police officers are telling me, and I think my colleagues, is that they need help. They need more police officers on the street. Our population has grown substantially, but the number of police officers has not. A year ago, I proposed adding 200 police officers at the recommendation of the police, and the administration pushed back. In the recent budget, they added 30. And And as we've discussed, there may be certain parts of the city that don't want more police officers, but there are areas that do. And in South Tampa, for example, we have a pretty bad drug problem, and we need to address that. And that also ties into fire rescue. In my area, which is just slightly north of Gandy, there's one fire station nearby. That fire station is also the Marine unit. And so when somebody's drowning out in the bay, they get in the fire truck, drive 10 minutes or so over to West Shore Yacht Club, get out of the truck, start up the boat, and drive into the water to save someone. It makes better sense to have a Marine unit that doesn't have to drive. That way they can get to sea and rescue people faster. But imagine when they're at sea, they're not protecting the area around where I live and where others live. So it'd be better to have more coverage. And the fire department is asking for more fire representatives. They're asking for more ambulances and some other new equipment. One of the lift truck near my house just celebrated its 23rd birthday, and you're not supposed to use them more than 5 years.
That's a significant deficit for the fire department. I know that the PBA had said, Bill has a wonderful breakfast once a month. It's usually or not once a month, once every other month or so for neighborhood leaders. It's called Breakfast with Bill. And in Breakfast with Bill, we had the PBA president there, and he was talking about that there's a significant number of officers who are no longer, they're not on the streets regularly, that they are doing desk jobs versus being actively out in our community and moving forward. That was something that I learned from that process. And I just, we're supposed to get 30 police and 30 fire. I haven't heard anything else about because both of those were coming in on grants. And the police grant, they think that the city's going to receive that police grant. But the fire grant was kind of questionable. Have you heard anything else about that?
I haven't heard an update on it. It sounded like it was rejected, but I'm hoping that they'll find a way to cover it some other way. There are, as you know, some slush funds within the city. And so I hope we'll be able to use those. By the way, and Hades covered this on previous shows, but there have been some issues with the police department in the past. They were created under the last administration, not this administration. And this city council has been working with the police chiefs to try to end those programs. But one of them was 2015. The Tampa Bay Times did an investigative series called Biking While Black that showed that some police officers were in heavier numbers pulling over Black people, especially in East Tampa, while riding bicycles. And the community pushed back. There was a United States Justice Department civil rights investigation at the time, or investigation that resulted in a civil rights complaint. And then a couple years ago, the city started being investigated by a new program that the Tampa Bay Times studied called, I think it's called the Safe Homes Program, but we call it Renting While Black. And the idea is that if anybody in your household gets charged with a crime, not convicted, but charged, the landlord can kick you out. And we've already got a waiting list of 25,000 people who want affordable housing. And so we start kicking people out, it could cause more problems. And the city was for many years. Imagine grandparents who have taken in a teenage grandchild, and the teenage grandchild is charged with smoking pot, for example. Conceivably, they could get kicked out of their home. And it's not fair to the grandparents. It's not fair to the community for that to happen. If somebody's charged with or convicted of a heinous crime, maybe we would look at that, because people living in affordable housing want safe environments. But we need to be careful to make sure the folks are not discriminated against. It appears, as far as I can see, that this was not an issue with the police officers themselves or the police department. It was orders from above. It was from the last administration ordered these programs as their policy attempts to try to reduce crime. And what we found, it did not. It did the opposite. From 2015 to 2021, violent crime in the city of Tampa skyrocketed. Because of the Renting While Black program, the city is still now, almost 2 years later, under a civil rights investigation from the United States Justice Department. So this is the second Justice Department investigation in 7 years. So it's a real problem for the city of Tampa, and we're all trying to fix it. The last 3 police chiefs have been working closely with us to try to fix it.
I think the data shows that the more people on the streets, the more we need police, and the more we need fire. And so housing is extremely important, because when people don't have a place to live, it creates a bigger problem. And I think I had some data on it, but I don't think
we know that crime correlates with the economy also, and because of the economic system, the city of Tampa and the county outsource economic development to a private group. Some people call the Secret Dakota Ring Society, otherwise called the Tampa Bay Economic Development Council. To be a part of that organization, you pay $30,000, and then if you're friends with the right people, you get inside information that's paid for by the city and county. And I don't think that's fair. Everything I do is open source, because the way we improve our economic numbers is by including everyone. And we need inclusive economic development, which we've never had in Tampa. And as a result, if you look at tampascorecard.com, you'll see that Tampa has succeeded with people above 200,000 in income, but we failed with everybody below. Everybody below has felt like we've been in recession for several years. And a lot of the leadership earns above 200,000, so they haven't really seen it. But if you look at it economically, we have a real problem we need to resolve. If you go down about 4th or 5th slide, go down. Keep going. This is per capita income, and you'll see that Tampa there is third in the state. You'll see that St. Pete surpassed Tampa in 2019. That means it usually economic numbers lag whatever the reality is. So that shows that the economic strategies, at least from 2015 through 2019, failed because we dipped or went sideways, and St. Petersburg surpassed us. And then go to the next slide. We find that those numbers are artificially high because look at the percentage of people making over $200,000 a year. And our overall per capita income is not as high as Fort Lauderdale's, even though our percentage of people over 200,000 is similar. But look at St. Petersburg. It's a lot more distributed in St. Pete. And that's why their per capita income has gone up, because they had strategies that brought everybody up, not just the people above 200,000. If you go to the next slide, this is median household income. So this is looking at homes, not just, whole households, not just individuals. And what you see there is that St. Pete and Fort Lauderdale are way ahead of Tampa, and Tampa is just about to dip. Right now, we're 3rd among largest cities in the state, but conceivably will dip into 4th or 5th place soon if we don't change this. Go to the next numbers while we're here. This is per capita income compared to aspirational cities like Charlotte, Austin, Atlanta. Politicians talk about these cities a lot. And what this shows is that Tampa is the red line at the bottom. We haven't caught up with those cities yet. And in fact, we're not even moving in the same direction to catch up with them. We're not even close to catching up with them. So it's a myth that we're now among the great cities like Charlotte, Austin, Atlanta. We're not. Go to the next slide. And the next slide just shows us, again, median household income compared to those other cities. Again, we're not even close. Next slide. So if you look at disparity between blacks and whites, this is male and female. So the average woman in St. Petersburg earns almost $7,000 less than a man, but in Tampa, it's more than $9,000. And it's gotten worse in the last few years. And so if we want to have equality in our community, we need to be among the cities that close that gap. I mean, women are leading in law schools, or leading in MBA programs, but somehow we haven't closed the pay gap. Go to the next slide. And this is worse here. This is this shows you tracking over time, and it shows really Tampa had the highest during the last decade. So 2011 to 2019, Tampa had the highest disparity, or to 2018, sorry, Tampa had the highest disparity among men and women. And then we went down a little bit, but now we popped back up. So we have to watch that. Go to the next slide. And this is the difference between African Americans and Caucasians. So again, in the Florida average is 17,000 difference, but Tampa's almost 32,000, and it's gotten worse in the last few years. This is a really embarrassing trend, and we need to fix this. And why do I mention this? I don't say this because I want us to think badly about Tampa. We should be proud of things that our city has accomplished, but we've had the wrong economic strategy. We've done great at building buildings and adding new restaurants and adding amenities, but now what we need to do is focus on closing these gaps so that we can economically be one of the great cities in the world. And why is this important? Because it doesn't matter what we put out in our marketing brochures. The companies that want to invest here, the people that want to invest here, they can see this real data. This is U.S. Census data. It's available to everybody. So it's not like we're hiding from it by not looking at it. Everybody knows that it's there. So we can believe the vanity rankings if we want, or we can look at the real data and look at how to fix it. And I think an example to fix this issue is to help more people in East Tampa start their own businesses and help more people to buy their own homes. We can't subsidize rent long enough to help people permanently, but we can help them buy a home, and then they have built-in inflation. They have a built-in way of protecting themselves against inflation.
I'm kind of confused there, Bill. So we have this company or whatever it is in the city that gets $30,000, that people get to join for $30,000. And when reality is that we need more small business. And I mean, what small business can come up with $30,000 to join whatever that is? I know I should know.
They can't, but if you're friends with the right people, you can get invited at a lower amount. But if you're not friends with the right people, then you don't get included in those insider circles.
And this is subsidized with city tax dollars?
Yeah, the city and county together are putting in between 25 and 33% of the budget of this organization. And it doesn't, I'm not saying the organization doesn't deserve to exist. They have a purpose for the private sector. But my thing is that why are we outsourcing economic development? For the $550,000 that the city of Tampa puts in, we could hire 3 or 4 people and we could radically transform economic development in the city of Tampa. But instead we're outsourcing to people whose only job is to recruit companies from out of state. And by the way, when they recruit them, they want the city and county to give them subsidies, or the state also. What I realized several years ago as I was looking at the data is they would make promises like the company's going to add 100 jobs and 25 million investment, but they never follow up to find out if the companies actually did it. And we know in most cases they haven't. So if they're not holding these companies accountable that are getting millions in subsidies, then we shouldn't give them subsidies anymore. So a couple of years ago, I proposed and city council approved an ordinance at the city that said, we're no longer going to give subsidies to any companies that refuse to sign an annual sworn affidavit saying whether or not they hit the goals. And guess what? Since then, they haven't asked for any more subsidies because they know they can't track the results. If they can't track the results, why are we doing it? We know if we're helping people start their own businesses, we know whether those businesses succeeded or not.
But don't we have our own economic development department?
We do, but it's mostly focused on real estate development. And that's just a historical thing. And we've got great people in that department now, especially the administrator running it. She and her deputy turned around downtown Lakeland and made downtown Lakeland a thriving place. But, I worked on the downtown redevelopment in St. Pete starting in the early 90s. And what we found is that the secret to success in a downtown is about how the people connect with each other. And what Tampa has always done well is subsidize developers to build buildings. In St. Pete, what they did is they built the connectivity of the people, and then the buildings came. And it's much more powerful to build the connectivity of the people first.
Well, it would seem, and I mean, this kind of eases the transition to my next question when we talk about downtown. I don't know if all the folks who are watching today understand what a community redevelopment area is, otherwise known as a CRA. The last numbers I saw for the downtown CRA, that CRA alone has gotten about $3 billion since it was set up in revenue that remained downtown. The funds weren't spent anyplace else but downtown. That's what the whole purpose of those CRAs is, to cure slum and blight. And I guess my question, or the transition, is, we've got things set up in place in those parts of the city, but I mean, honestly, business, we can have these huge businesses, but they're not necessarily reinvesting in our area. And so we're offsetting these large businesses, but then we have these small businesses that are able to grow here and remain here and continue spending money and continue employing folks here. One of my very favorite examples is USAA. They are based out of Brandon and Riverview, and I'm sure that they got some money to build those big fine buildings they're in, but they will not provide homeowners insurance for a large part of our community. So it kind of goes, it's kind of backhanded. Oh yeah, we'll send somebody there, but we're not going to support the folks who live here. So can you talk to us a little bit more about CRAs and how that funding to cure slum and blight can maybe possibly be more effectively channeled for the folks in our city?
Yeah, we have 8 different districts in the city that are called CRAs, and they all report up to the CRA board, which is city council. Before the city council joined 4 years ago, the CRA was essentially controlled by the mayor's office, even though by law it's controlled by city council sitting as a CRA board. We changed that 4 years ago, and we've been trying to make it more responsive to the public. What happened before 4 years ago is that most of it was used for subsidies for real estate developers. What we've been trying to do in the last 4 years is use it to provide amenities that people want in their neighborhoods and communities. An example, instead of thinking about East Tampa as a place where you can go gentrify and tear down everything and build big high rises, let's think about it as a series of historic neighborhoods that need amenities just like other parts of the city. And so as we're looking at that, we try to figure out how do we best use the money in a community oriented way. By law, they're supposed to solve slum and blight. And one of the CRAs in downtown and others in Channel District, I would argue there's no slum and blight in either right now. Throughout the city, including South Tampa, there are parks falling apart. There are roads falling apart. There's a lack of fire stations. There's a lack of fire rescue personnel. We have fire trucks that are 23 years old, even in South Tampa. And in South Tampa Interbay down by McDill, one of the 2 primary places where kids in South Tampa play baseball, the dugouts are falling apart. There's pieces literally falling on kids' heads, and there's no money to renovate that. But in downtown, we are this year going to have somewhere around $30-40 million in the CRA. And we have to find something to spend it on. And what I ask my colleagues, is there anything we would spend it on in downtown that's more important than fixing the dugouts for those kids who are in danger right now, or fixing the park that's been falling apart for 30 years in East Tampa, or fixing the roads that are falling apart somewhere else? We need to solve the citywide problems. And an example in downtown, people say, why is it that new development is not paying for all the changes that we have? Well, take Water Street, for example. All those great new buildings there right now are generating about $17 million a year in taxes, and will generate more in the future. But that 17 million is trapped in downtown. Keep in mind that until a month ago, the road budget was 4.1 million. We increased it to 11 million. But imagine if we had that 17 million throughout the city, we could almost quadruple our road repair budget. The parks repair budget is 5 million a year. We could quadruple that. So it makes sense to me to move some, at least, of the money out. By law, we can only move 50% of it out. But if we just move 50% of the downtown CRA out, estimate is that we can move $220 million. That means on average, and it'll be less the first year and more the last year, but on average, we'll pull out $20 million a year without raising taxes. Why wouldn't we do that? The mayor's tax increase would have been $45 million for a one mil increase, and we now could generate 20 million without even raising taxes.
I completely agree. I think this year's budget has kind of shown us the giant hole that we have encountered with different parts of the city and things that should be coming in.
I just
the-
wanted to
Go ahead.
mention Adrian Rodriguez. Hi, thank you for tuning in.
Hey, Adrian.
And she made a comment in response to something what you said.
Yeah. So on housing,
on housing.
on housing, Nicole Travis, who's the head of the Real Estate and Economic Development Department, talked about this a couple of weeks ago at council. But until 3 years ago, the city was putting zero of general fund money into affordable housing. And before that, we don't know how far back, but assuming zero, because a lot of money was spent to subsidize general developers. And remember, the policy of the last administration was tear down affordable housing. They tore down 2,000 units without any plan to rebuild them at a time when we needed 50,000 more. And so we were hit with a deficit when we started. So 3 years ago, there was zero from the general fund. And then 2 years ago, the mayor put in $5 million out of the general fund, which city council approved. But 3 years ago, I made a motion to spend 30% of the CRA money in all the districts on affordable housing. Unfortunately, the staff, for whatever reason, decided not to follow those instructions. But last year, this year, they did. And so that's generating about 25 million. I won't get my numbers exactly right, but somewhere around 25 million for affordable housing just from the CRA budget. And then my colleague Lynn Hertak with Stephanie found about 20 million more, and the mayor put in 5 or 10. So the net was that we have about 56 million between the CRA and the city this year for affordable housing. That's way more than has ever been spent in the city before. And think about Hope pushed for 10 years to get a special income stream for the county for affordable housing. And we put in city council more than that into the budget, and going into next year, we will be putting similar amounts or more in for the CRA, and then the city will be putting money in as well. The problem is that we need somewhere between $5 and $10 billion to fix the affordable housing problem. And even though we're putting in 10 times more than we did 2 years ago, it's just a small amount compared to what we need. We can't possibly, the whole budget of the city is 1.9 billion. We can't possibly solve the years of neglect in affordable housing in the short run.
I wanted to just jump in real quickly to say hello to former City Councilman Orlando Goods. Thanks for tuning in and commenting in the comment section. For those of you that are viewing, that will view, go ahead and follow along some of the comments that he made in reaction to some of what Councilman Bill Carlson has been discussing.
I can't read what he said. What is he saying? Orlando was a big champion for East Tampa.
Yes.
And I loved working with him because he was a great champion for East Tampa, and he still is a great champion for East Tampa. And he and I worked very well across the dais from each other in trying to get things done. And I'm sad that he's not there. He really pushed for good government. He was on the Charter Review Commission with me, and the same thing. We worked really hard to make sure we protected the balance of powers. And then he and I did that on city council as well. And I hope he gets an elected office sometime in the future again.
Okay, so this is some of his comments. Correct. Since 2019, motion was made for city council budget person, but always failed. Glad this is happening. Mm-hmm. He also said it's city council's hire per charter. My appointee, Joe Johnson, brought this up every time.
Orlando's appointee, who was chair of the budget advisory committee 2 years ago, found $80 million in slush fund money, and the administration refused to allow us to even talk about any of it. And then eventually Joe resigned because he was tired of city council and the mayor's office not listening to them.
I think that's what he's referring to when he comments. That's why he really resigned. Again, Orlando Goods, thanks for tuning in and commenting and contributing to the conversation that Stephanie and Bill Carlson are having. Keela McCaskill says, share this TampaScorecard.com in your communities. We need to make sure our elected officials understand that we want the outcome this scorecard presented.
If you go to just Google Tampa Bay EDC, and we got an email from the former chair of the EDC a couple of days ago that has all kinds of.
Is this it? I have the right.
No, that's tampascorecard.com. But if somebody Googles Tampa Bay EDC, you'll see the data that the Tampa Bay EDC is putting up, which is mostly vanity data, or it's county data, or regional data. One of the proponents of the EDC is the head of a company that moved here with back office jobs, and they got at least $7 million in subsidies. So of course they're out there promoting to help other companies get subsidies. And we don't need that. If you look at the most successful companies in our region, think about the companies that most people would mention if they're really looking at companies. They would say companies like Jabil, Tech Data, Publix, Raymond James. Maybe they would mention Sykes. All of those companies, by the way, except for Sykes, aren't even located in Tampa. A lot of the big companies are located in Pinellas County, and a lot of the global companies are based in Pinellas County because that was their economic development strategy, while Tampa is focused on call centers. That's why we have so many back office jobs in Tampa that don't lead to anywhere. My brother worked at one of them years ago and was told, if you want to make more than $45,000 a year, you got to move to New York. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't recruit and subsidize these low-paying jobs or back office jobs or jobs that are redundant in case a 9/11 event happens again. I mean, we need to help local companies grow. Tech Data, Jabil, Raymond James were all local companies that built up. I think maybe one of them moved when they were a small company. Even Sykes was a small company relatively when it moved here, and then it built up. Publix is based in Polk County, but it grew from nothing to be a huge major player in the world in grocery stores. If we focus on and support local companies, we'll do a lot better in generating wealth for our community.
Stephanie.
Bill, next question. That 30% in the CRAs, do you have any idea how much of it's been spent and how much, what kind of?
Almost none of it was spent last year. And this year we're pushing to make sure folks spend it wisely. We were presented a couple of weeks ago with a new plan for affordable housing. I think there's too much of it in rental assistance. There's some pressure now taken off of rent inflation because the markets are slowing down. It doesn't mean that rents aren't going to go up, but there's not as much focus on it. But if we are paying rental assistance, that's money out the door. It doesn't help someone permanently, and it doesn't help us to build a sustainable environment. We don't have enough money to subsidize forever. We need to help people buy homes, and they're relatively inexpensive things that we can help them do. I'm not saying we should get rid of all rental assistance, but we need to put a smaller and smaller part of the bucket in there. We need to help people buy homes. There are programs that already exist where people can go learn how to save money, how to set up their financials to apply for a mortgage, where they can get first-time home buyer assistance, all kinds of programs. And when the city helps in, we can make sure it's even easier for people to buy homes.
Okay. You know what? I have one more big question for you. And there was an article in the Tampa Bay Times on September 30th that said, who's going to be our next mayor? What are your feelings on that?
Well, what that picture showed is the last two mayors. So then the story goes on to talk about a bunch of people who could potentially be mayor next time. I think my name is mentioned in there. We don't know at all. We're still 2 years away from anybody announcing any kind of campaign. And so right now, I think everybody's just focused on doing a good job in whatever position they're in to make sure we make this community better. And I'm hoping that now that we're past the re-election of this mayor, hopefully we can try to build consensus and work together going forward. Just to let you know that this mayor and some of her people were involved in the campaign against me. They spent about $850,000 against my $150,000. We still won 60%. Thank you to all of you for supporting us. But still, the day after the election, or the night of the election, I talked to my opponent, and I've since met with him and made peace. The next day after the election, I called the mayor and congratulated her. And she and I have met several times, and we put a scheduled meeting on our calendars every month for at least the rest of the year. And so even though we don't agree about everything, my proposal is that we put the past behind us and we move forward to try to make this a better city.
Okay, well, I wanted, and I know Stephanie's going to be okay with this. I saw this post not too long ago. I wanted to share it and read it. Neither of you knew that this was going to happen. This is spontaneous. I'm very spontaneous. Keela McCaskill, recently I caught this on my feed. my social media feed, and it's her saying she's a big supporter of Bill Carlson. Keela McCaskill's a wonderful human being. Recently, we met up, and I was starving, and I didn't have time to grab lunch, and she brought me some soul food from a local eatery there in Tampa, and it was delicious. Thank you. But she says in this post, the next time someone questions why we want to contact Bill Carlson regarding matters in East Tampa, make sure you share this photo. So I'm sharing, Keela. I'm sharing. This is enough reason for me. As a city, we are fortunate to have him as a public servant. When was the last time a Harvard grad stopped by to share how we can improve an impoverished area? It's the Harvard for me. I wish he would run for mayor. The entire city would be better, not just pockets of the city. And I think that that's true. I don't reside in Hillsborough County or in Tampa, but I've been around East Tampa. And in fact, when Straz, the late David Straz, ran, I helped support him because that was one of his things of his platform, the neglect of East Tampa and even West Tampa, in comparison to the more elite areas. So true that.
Is that if I show up in East Tampa or West Tampa or North Tampa, people say, well, why is he showing up there? He's just doing it because he wants to run for mayor or whatever. The reality is that I happen to represent South Tampa. I'm elected by South Tampa, but I have to vote on issues throughout the whole city. And so it's in the community's best interest to make sure I know about all parts of the city. Last Thursday at the end of the meeting, I thanked my colleagues because most of them came to an event that Stephanie ran south of Gandy. South of Gandy is an area that has been neglected for many years, and we need to focus more on helping south of Gandy. And guess what? Most of my colleagues now have either been on a personal tour by Stephanie and Carol Ann, or they came to the event. I mean, example, Luis Vieira from New Tampa drove all the way down to the bottom of South Tampa to go to an event at south of Gandy. That helps my district. That helps me because if they understand the issues in South Tampa, they'll hopefully vote for me on their issues. And the same thing, if I go to East Tampa, learn about the issues there, I'll be an advocate for East Tampa, just like I was when Orlando Goods was on city council. Now Gwen Henderson is on city council, and hopefully we'll be able to work together to support her issues as well.
I concur with Bill. Honestly, it was wonderful to have them come down and visit. And all of our city council have been on what we call the SOG tour. We've had several staff members, at least one deputy administrator, to spend time with us down here just to see how different our neighborhoods are. And Carol Ann and I, when we first started doing fan work for the Tampa Homeowners Association of Neighborhoods, we learned very, very quickly how different all the areas of Tampa are. And I think that Bill is 100% correct. If he's not going to other parts of the city, it makes it very difficult for him to vote on land use issues, on legislative issues that only deal with particular areas of the city, because we have a lot of legislation that only deals with a small area. And if he's not visiting those areas, if all the city council people aren't taking the opportunities to move around throughout the city and see the different parts of the city, then they cannot make an educated vote. We would love to see more folks come and see our part of the world. I'm going to do a little plug. I went to a meeting with McDill last week, and I have been operating on 2017 numbers. There used to be 22,000 people working at McDill. Now it's over 30,000 in the last 5 years. So our community is very different than it was 5 years ago. So, and I think Seminole Heights is different, and, north of Gandy is different. So
think about Guido Maniscalco until the last election represented West Tampa for 8 years.
Right.
So he's an expert on West Tampa, and we trust him to come up with ideas. Now Charlie Moran is representing West Tampa, and Guido is citywide. But if Stephanie calls Guido to talk to him about a South Tampa issue, that's great for me, because if we vote for something for South Tampa, that means my constituents are happy because they get what they want. So I welcome people in South Tampa to call my colleagues. And if somebody from East, West, or North wants to call me, you're welcome to do that as well. I'm happy to talk about any issues anywhere in the city.
Okay, so I want to comment on someone commenting. Carol Ann Bennett says this show is excellent. So much good information. Everyone in the city would benefit from watching this. And I think the one of the reasons why this broadcast is so excellent is because Stephanie Poynor is hosting this, and I think that I'm gonna retire from broadcasting. I much rather do the behind the scenes production and engineering. I think you're a natural, Stephanie, and so I might pass the baton on to you to be a regular host.
Everybody needs to be afraid if you let me loose.
Yeah.
If I get
Hey,
more,
can I say one thing? I don't know how much longer we have. But
We have, yes, of course we have. Let's see. For the hour, we're gonna have this will be an hour-long broadcast. I typically like to do 30, but it was a good conversation, and I agree with Carol Ann Bennett that it's gonna be very beneficial for those in Tampa and elsewhere to listen and be informed about the issues in the city of Tampa. Carol Ann Bennett, again, thank you for tuning in. You have 5 minutes, Bill.
I just want to say something else about, you see a picture over my shoulder here. I've been a big proponent of the arts, and I'm not an artist, but what I found with the St. Pete experience and others is that the arts are very tied to innovation in the economy. And for years, we've been worried about AI taking over white collar jobs, and it's going to happen more and more in the next few years. The jobs that will be left will be jobs about creativity. And I know from interviewing CEOs of tech companies that having a strong arts community is essential for the tech companies, because just like in my industry, PR marketing, everybody who's in that industry also wants to write a novel. People who are in programming and other tech jobs, they also want to be sculptors or musicians or other things. So we need a thriving arts community. The picture above me, a few years ago, I was in St. Augustine looking at a gallery, and I saw these paintings, and I said to the gallery owner, I said, "These are phenomenal. Like, who is this? This stuff should be on museum walls." And the lady said, "Yeah, this painter has paintings in 22 museums around the world." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And she said, "He's one of the top African-American artists in the country. He was a runner-up for the Barack Obama portrait. He's in museums around the world, very highly collected." And I said, "Well, where does he live?" And she said, "Tampa." And so I started doing some research back in Tampa. Nobody I knew in the arts community knew him. So I cold called him and said, "I'd love to meet you." And this guy, he lives on Harbor Island. His gallery is in Channel District. And he's one of the best artists in the country who happens to be located here. And that's another whole story about how he ended up here. But phenomenal artist. But this painting happens to be of a building that I've been trying to save, along with many others, since I met Willie Robinson back in 2013. It's the Jackson Boarding House. And just a couple weeks ago, we finally got a deal approved that now makes way for the Jackson House Foundation, the USF, and the Tampa History Center to go in and start renovating it. And that will finally be approved sometime in the next 30 days. And then in November, we will have an update from the Jackson House Foundation about how they intend to renovate and restore the building. And this building, for anybody who doesn't know, it is half a block from Tampa Union Station. Until the 1960s, African Americans coming to Tampa could not stay in white hotels. And so there were only two places they could stay in Tampa. One was across the street from the Tampa Union Station. The other was in West Tampa. And this was part of the black downtown of Central Avenue. Imagine 7th Avenue across from the Tampa Union Station. At some point, 70s, they went through and the city bulldozed almost all of it. This is the last significant building left of the African-American business district, but it also is a symbol of the segregation era that I want my kids and others to learn about, so we never go back to it. But it also was a place where important music was performed. Think about Tampa was a jumping off point for Cuba. So anybody who went to Cuba would take the train to Tampa, then they would take the steamship from Tampa to Cuba. So all the famous African-American artists, musicians, actors, they all came to Tampa and they performed there. The last thing is I've offered to the Jackson House Foundation, once they've restored it, I personally want to buy the piano that will go in the lobby, because I can't wait to hear music played in this building again.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, Bill, I just want to say thank you for coming on and being my first guest on Florida You Judge.
Talk about music.
letting me step into your shoes for a day. I do appreciate you.
For
Thanks,
a day?
David.
Oh no, you're gonna be coming on more. No, not just for a day. What are you talking about? So thank you for hosting. You were amazing. You were amazing. You're coming on again, I'm sure. I hope. I pray. Thanks, City Councilman Bill Carlson. We're very benefited by your service on the council. I've
Absolutely.
seen you in action. I've seen a lot of the good things that you've done, even though I don't reside there. But I do business out there. I have people that I care about that live out there. Thank you for your service, and your activism. Thank you for everyone that tuned in and share. Please share this. Thanks, Stephanie, again. Everyone have a great rest of your Saturday and weekend. Till next time, Heidi Oropesa with Florida You Judge, along with Stephanie Poynor.
Thank you.